Hello and welcome to the Barely There podcast. I know you recognize the two luscious men on your screen. I'm Duke Coughlin, that pod guy Duke. That's Lucas Perfetti 46. And we're back. We're
Oh,
fucking back, Lucas. What's
what do we
going
call
on,
this?
my
The
brother?
pilot or the inaugural episode or whatever? This is me and Duke have done many episodes together, but this is the first time that it is branded by Duke. Actually, came up with the name. So if you don't like it, go ahead and add him and tweet at him. I actually approved of the name as well, so it was a collaborative effort. But I'm really happy to be back. Have a ton to talk about today in general. There's so much we have to catch up on. We've been gone for a little while. Got a really nice refresh. Got to kind of lay low while some of the shots were being fired. We knew Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace, we knew it was all going to end and come crashing down at some point. So we are turning a new page along with the Chicago Bears, and it's exciting. It's an exciting time for us, an exciting time for Bears fans.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's kind of paid attention to our previous work per se, they knew our feelings about Matt Nagy. They knew our feelings about kind of the whole situation that was going on with the roster and the team up to midway through last year, even back to before 2020. We were not Matt Nagy guys. We were not, we were kind of Ryan Pace guys, but at the same time, we kind of understood by sticking with Matt Nagy, that was probably something that was going to have to happen. So, it's been kind of nice to kind of sit back, not have to worry about covering every little thing that has to do with the Chicago Bears, but I'm definitely excited to be back. Lucas, we have a new head coach. We have a new GM. We have an entirely new staff. How are you feeling about Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles? Just quick reactions.
Yeah, I mean, quick reaction because we're already kind of into free agency. Eberflus, not very impressive. My first legitimate impression of him when I found out he was a finalist was I was like, this guy looks like a fucking physics professor at MIT, and I'm not a fan of just his overall appearance. But when I dove into it and compared it to other options, like a Jim Caldwell, who actually seemed more appealing than a Dan Quinn or some of these other guys, I know that would have probably made some good podcasting, me and you arguing about Dan Quinn. But overall, like for some of these names, I prefer the unknown of Matt Eberflus, and that's something that I appreciate. It's a good sign that he comes from Marinelli and kind of has that loafing system, and we're going to hear all about that shit. We'll see how it translates. We've seen many times good or great defensive coordinators or offensive coordinators become bad head coaches. So I'm on wait and see mode with this team. They get no benefit of the doubt. I know Ryan Poles has been a very coveted prospect at GM for the last couple of years. He's been a finalist in a lot of different interviews. I've heard good things about him. I heard great things about Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. They both ended up, not well. They both got a job. Matt Nagy tucked his little tail in between his legs and went back to Big Daddy Reed, but at least Ryan Pace made his way a little bit. But yeah, that's my over. I'd rather be underwhelmed than overwhelmed or really disappointed. So underwhelmed is okay with me.
Yeah, so for those who haven't caught up, obviously Matt Nagy being the new laundry room associate for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Big Daddy Pace going to Atlanta and just being in the front office, taking over, making power moves. Yeah, I remember being in group chats with you, Lucas, and there was no shortage of disagreements when it came to who we wanted as head coach. Like we argued pretty good there for a while. There were threats to leave group chats. Friendships were going to be broken. Like that was the point we were at. So yeah, we'll definitely end up talking about some more of that later on. But like, I guess the way I feel about Ryan Poles and specifically is that was a kind of a big league hire. That was a hire where we saw the potential of him going somewhere else, specifically in our division, and we're like, this is our guy. We like what he has to say. It really sucks he comes from the Kansas City tree, considering we've just have not had luck there. But this seems like a good young mind who is familiar with the city of Chicago, familiar with the expectations at Hallis Hall. He says all the right things. You know what I mean? He's a guy in an interview, you kind of want to go to war for him and you don't even play for him. But I've always kind of learned you can't buy into somebody before you see what they're all about. I do like that it doesn't seem that he's buying in too hard on combine numbers for what it comes as far as draft strategy moving forward, but we'll obviously see on draft night. So yeah, there's a lot of things to like about Ryan Poles. As far as Matt Eberflus, dude, he looks like a guy, Lucas probably puts him a little nerdy. I think the gap tooth kind of puts me a little bit on the side that he'd be like at a, South Side Irish bar sipping on some whiskey or something like that. He definitely has a little bit of that nerd to him, but he also has that little bit of that, I could probably win in a fist fight if need be. So that's kind of a plus side. Plus, he's a defensive guy.
He's a little bit more stacked up than I anticipated. So the more I did some digging and found some shirtless pics, and he's got some meat on his bones. So I didn't, I swear. But either way, I do like the couple of things that I will identify as positive. If we're going to be optimistic going into this new regime. Polls straight up saying I didn't like the way our offensive line handled protecting Justin Fields, and not just in, hey, like, your drop back step or whatever you're doing as an offensive lineman. Duke will get more technical with you, but just the overall, after he's getting hit, picking him up. They're not picking him up. They're not protecting him. The whole Jermaine Ifedi incident where he slapped Tevin Jenkins for being the only one to stick up for him. So I do like that polls acknowledge that and takes that very seriously, being a former offensive lineman. Also like the fact that, Eberflus has a 30-year resume. This is his first opportunity, and he's still only like 50 years old. So you think you get a really veteran resume with still some youth and adaptation, possibly, hopefully. So, and that's what he's saying, right? Is his willingness to adapt is there. So, you could tell that like George and Ted were taking notes in this hiring process, and we're like, okay, what were our biggest complaints on Twitter? Yes, Matt Nagy can't adapt his offense. Cool, we're gonna get a coach. Matt Nagy doesn't like, or Matt Nagy won't give up play calling. Cool, let's go get a coach that says in his opening press conference he will not be calling defensive plays on his side. Like, let's go just check all those boxes. So, like I said, talk is cheap, and you did mention free agency, and I think we're kind of 10 minutes on an older subject. So now they know our general, feel of things. How do you think, we should move forward as a franchise? Like you said, the combine just happened, free agency's opening up. What's your overall strategy? If the fucking Duke of Kankakee was sitting in that chair, what would you be doing right now?
So I haven't made any, really any secret of how I feel about this draft class on Twitter, but just so I can clear it up on here, I'm not in love with this class. I think there is a lot of talent in the mid to late rounds. And that kind of inclines me that if I was in Ryan Pohl's shoes, I'd really look at game film. Like, game film would be the name of the game going into this draft, because I want to see guys who can play football in the mid to late rounds. I want to see guys you can grab that went to a good power conference, that showed out, maybe didn't measure the best on the combine. Maybe they didn't go to the combine. Maybe they haven't gone to their own pro day. I think there's a lot of talent out there. I just don't see any high-end talent. I know there's a lot of people who want to trade up, this Chris Olave pipe dream, because it's a pipe dream to go get Chris Olave in the first round. I just don't see it as being something that's realistic, especially with how many picks we don't have to work with. And do we really want to mortgage our future in the first year of a new GM? You know what I mean? That was kind of the whole Ryan Pace thing, was we're going to keep pushing it down the fucking road. We're going to keep pushing it down the road. Does Ryan Poles want to do that? I guess we're going to find out, but he doesn't seem like a guy, from all the reports talking about how he's going into this draft cycle as a guy who wants to keep kicking that tire down the road. I think we need to accept the fact that we can get some more picks in the later rounds, potentially trade back a couple times, because I feel like a lot of teams are kind of aiming at that second to third round more than they feel safe drafting or trading up into the first round. So there's potential to get some value here. Obviously we're going to go into some names that we like, but I don't know how you feeling about it, Lucas. How do you feel about the first round of the NFL draft?
No, the first round is not. I kind of went over this with Joey Herf. Shout out to Joey Herf and the boys. I went over this with them last night, and yes, that top end talent. Sure, there's some really high end edge rushers, a couple really high end corners, but that's every year. There's that. You know what I mean? There's a couple of really high end defensive tackles. But the wide receiver room, when you look at need versus what is very healthy in this draft, I think you have some really valuable inside linebackers that could be 4-pronged special teamers and play first and second down for you, that you can get in the fourth round in this draft. You know what I mean? Like, when you look at the positions that are falling, and that the Bears actually need, I don't think like addressing needs in this draft should be the strategy at all. It should be BPA. It should be trade down. But you know it. I know it. The guys I was talking to last night know it. GMs know it. This is not a very strong draft. I mean, the Bears kind of got very lucky, and Ryan Pace got very lucky last year, because this is one year that you can give up a top 10 pick. This is the fucking year, bro. Because like trading back is going to be almost abysmal, because no one wants to trade up. There's usually you're trading up for what? Quarterbacks, maybe a wide receiver, maybe a big time edge rusher, something like that. But you're not trading up into the top 10 to get a wide receiver when they're not even ranking. You look at who would you call the top wide receiver in this draft? Treylon Burks, maybe one of those guys, like the kid from Alabama.
I mean, I really like Treylon Burks, but
what I'm getting at is
I think either Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. Honestly, the Ohio State duo was just ridiculous this year. So
yeah, Garrett Wilson, right? Like he's maybe the fourth best prospect last year in terms of wide receivers. Like you stack him up, like there's no one close. And if you even go through, like, I hate the NFL.com participant database or whatever for the combine. They give everyone a draft grade, but there is some ballpark and there is some validity to those lists. And if you look, like a guy like Jamar Chase was a 7.11 prospect. That means you are a year one starter ready to go and flourish. And that they had a correct grade on that. The top prospect in this draft was 6.88. And Jamar Chase, you get what I'm saying? Like there is like a steep drop off when it comes to the top 10 of talent. I think everyone's going to try to trade back, but at the same time, you kind of think when you have this type of draft where it's like, hey, we have this huge clump of players, then you're really picking flavors. And that I'm talking about any position. So you're coming up, and I think you're going to see a lot more manipulation, guys trading up and down 5 different spots in the second and third round, because there's going to be certain guys that are higher on certain boards. I know I kind of went on a little bit of a rant.
No,
but
you're okay. Kind of the flip side of that, the more that I think about it, I could see teams really reaching in the first round too. Like if they can't get the value for the picks, like by trading back, like if people are being stingy about the second and third round, because obviously if trading back is the ideal, teams that are wanting to trade back into those picks, they're gonna be stingy about what they give up, because they know that there is talent in this draft, but it's later. We might see some reach, which would mean that some of the top guys in this draft could end up falling, and a lot of that could fall into combine numbers. This is kind of an unprecedented situation with how I feel about this draft. There have been some weak ones in the past, and we've seen a lot of guys, that we expected in the first round to drop because of it. I hate to bring up like the quarterback ideal, but like, there have been quarterbacks who were projected as top 15 picks that ended up falling to like the third round, like the Drew Lock draft, you know what I mean? Where Drew Lock fell that far because
it happens every year. And that's
because
why
it hits a point where GMs are like, you know what? I have this pick. Nobody's giving me the value I want for it. I might as well just get my number one guy on the board. So, I think you kind of nailed it with saying get the best player available. That's kind of where I feel like the Bears mindset needs to be. And like you were saying with defensive tackles, edge rushers, we don't necessarily need an edge rusher, but there is some offensive line depth as well. I could see some of those guys falling because teams fall in love with the 40 times of these wide receivers. A lot of these wide receivers, I'm scared about how well they can run routes, but they can run fast down the field. So you're going to have teams that are going to reach for that. So potentially if the Bears do sit at 39 and they end up taking a player, they could fall into a potential normal first round pick just by that alone.
Well, that and my thing is, like, you need to operate as Ryan Poles and company at a minimum of 2 years. Your plan has to be, hey, we're going to pull a Cincinnati and we are going to be Super Bowl contenders at the beginning of next year. So in my opinion, the best way to do that is by drafting BPA and is getting as much value as you can for next year's draft. Because when you really look at it, next year, the Bears, I mean, there's been ideas of Khalil Mack being floated out, which I think if you can get value for him, you should entertain it. If you're getting second and a third round pick, like get bent, we'll deal with the contract, because you look at it next year, it's going to be $120 million that the Bears are going to have ready to go, ready to spend, like not tied up. And then you think the year after that, you have Quinn, Mack, Jackson, and Goldman all falling off. So you're talking like they have a ton of money to play with in a full draft. So you need to play it right. Like the Bears need some depth at inside backer. We have one legitimate inside backer. In a draft like this, the 4th and 5th round, you can get guys that are going to play all of your special teams, make you a more competitive team in general. I think you need to have that 2-year plan in place. Otherwise, you're not going to have a shot. I love what you said about man, I'm tired of mortgaging the future and trying to trade up. Why would we trade up to get Chris Olave? Like, is Chris Olave truly a number one wide receiver, a bona fide number one wide receiver, like a Jamar Chase as a prospect, like a Mike Evans was as a prospect, like some of these guys that are true top five, not just at their position, but top five in the draft as a prospect? Like, that's not Chris Olave. He's a very good piece. He is not someone you want to mortgage. I want a true bona fide number one receiver at the start of 2023. If you trade up to go get a guy that you think is not going to be that guy, like, why not just sit there and stick and pick at 39 and get the second best offensive guard in the draft? People will think maybe you're overdrafting because it's not a position of value, but you could have a guy like the kid from Boston College, the guard there, or the kid from Kentucky that plays center that had an incredible Senior Bowl. Like, always take those guys that overachieve in the Senior Bowl. So I think you need to operate with a 2-year plan in mind. I think you need to try to get competitive. The fact that Aaron Rodgers like came out and said he's coming back to the Packers, not that it changes my opinion on what the Bears need to do, but it should also change the Bears' opinion on their aggressiveness. Like, hey, he's back, so it's not a wide open division. We can kind of retool, reset this year. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's build some culture. Let's bring some of our guys in, and then move forward from there and really take our splash in 2023.
Yeah, see, that's exactly what I was saying earlier, specifically about not like mortgaging the future. That's the number one thing. Like, give us a full draft class going into next year. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want one single pick for next year getting traded during this draft. That's where I'm feeling like I would much rather either stick or trade down with the picks that we have and try to get as many as possible. Because you talk about 4th, 5th round linebackers. I'm looking at Leo Chenal's numbers from his pro day right now. Ran a 4.5 40, 34 reps on the bench, and he's projected in the 4th to 5th round in a pretty good inside linebacker class. Those are the type of guys that have proven that they can play football at a high level. Those are the type of guys I want to get. I don't need insanely high ceiling guys in this draft. I just want us to be smart. We can take a little bit more shots in next year's draft. I'm very much on with you, Lucas, when I'm talking about getting the best player available. That is a number one, should be the priority. Get as many picks as possible. And also kind of that point about free agency and some of the amounts of money that we're going to have coming up. There are some potential cuts that are going to be coming forward, specifically a guy like Eddie Goldman, which I think is going to be a really intriguing thing to deal with moving forward. But speaking of getting a number one wide receiver, what are some guys in free agency that you really like, Lucas? Because I think two of them that I can think off the top of my head, DJ Chark, depending what happens with the Jaguars, 6'4", 205 pounds. He has speed, he has size, he can do a little bit of everything. Obviously, he had an ankle injury this past year that kept him out. But that's a guy that even, Doug Peterson's saying that he wants back because he values him as like a legit weapon for Trevor Lawrence. Well, that would be a good legit weapon opposite of a legit weapon we already have in Darnell Mooney for a guy like Justin Fields. I think Mooney gets kind of a lot of discredit to his ability because of his size. And I think a guy like DJ Chark would really change that. And another one that's going to enamors me, I'll be honest, and I was talking about it in the group chat the other day. You're going to hate me for it, Lucas, but Marquez Valdez-Scantling, dude. I really think his ability to stretch an offense opens up a lot for an offense. It would open up the middle of the field for a guy like Cole Kmet with a guy like Marquez Valdez-Scantling going deep, just because he's good at getting separation off the ball. He can beat press coverage. And, hey, he has had drops in the past, 0 drops last year, and I really think he's a guy that could stretch a defense. I know that's going to be an unpopular take, and I'm fine with that. He's not necessarily the first on my list, but he's definitely a guy that if we have interest in, I think a guy like Luke Getsy, who has worked well with the wide receivers in Green Bay. Hell, he made Alan Lazard look good. He's made Devontae Adams look good.
See, if we're going to go, well, he helped Devontae Adams become the best receiver. Let's not make it seem like
well,
I get what you're
being
saying.
in that position, it certainly helps.
Sounded was a little bit like.
I mean, there's a reason why the offensive coordinator of the Packers just got hired to the Broncos and was just given Russell Wilson. I mean, there's still something to be said about the system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. No, look, I'm if we're going to talk about a Green Bay Packers wide receiver, I'd probably prefer Lazard just because I think he complements Mooney a little bit better, right? Like he's got a bit more size on him. I think Mooney stretches the field well, and I think that realistically is Lazard
Scantling 6'4", dude. Like 6'4", 215.
MVS.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean. He has speed. He can get downfield. He can get separation.
That's the thing, though. That's weird that you tell me that because I mean I'm a jagoff for saying that in general, and anyone that wants to come at me for it, I totally understand. But Lazard made some of those big boy plays where I felt like he was going up over. I feel like every time he was just a non-factor. You know, I felt like Lazard made more of an impact. I feel like he made a little bit more. Maybe Lazard just has a lot stronger hands. I don't know, but he played bigger for sure, in my opinion. He just had a little bit more of that nasty to him. DJ Chark, I would actually really like that because to me, it's like I said, we got to be talking about Super Bowl 2023. So if you can't make a 5-year, $100 million mistake where 60 mils guaranteed, right? Like you can't make that kind of mistake and go all in on, say, Mike Williams was available and you gave him 20 million a year. And then it's like, now we made a mistake and now we're screwed and we don't have the money to replace our number one wide receiver. And we have to use one of our draft picks to try to replace him, right? DJ Chark's not going to put you in that position. His market value's right around $12 million. I think that's actually a steal for DJ Chark. He's you want to talk about a tactician? Like that guy can run every route in the tree. So big fan of DJ Chark. And I think he's a much better complement to Darnell Mooney. I keep saying, like, look at these guys from KC, a Byron Pringle, someone cheap like that. Like I'm talking like get guys that are able to do the job.
Get guys that have a lot of upside that could potentially actually be a number one, but not someone that we have to put all our chips in to have.
Yeah, the only guy I would be willing to do that is Amari Cooper. Let's back off. Bears fans, stop being so short-sighted. We're in for the long haul. Allen Robinson should not be a Bear ever again. The guy, what he displayed last year was absolutely disgusting. And somehow, because a couple guys got franchise tagged and this and that, now we're back at like, hey, well, we need number one receiver. We need a number one receiver for the Chicago Bears. And Allen Robinson's the best one on the free agent market. No, stop it. Allen Robinson had there's no chance he's coming back. You want to talk about a loaf system and talk about an effort-based system for your new coaching staff and your new GM, and you go ahead and look at last year's film, the motherfucker's gone, dude. He's done. Gone. There's no reason for him to come back. Allen Robinson has overextended his stay in Chicago. I hate hearing about him coming back to be the number one wide receiver. That would be an awful mistake to make. Like, even as big of a fan as you were of Jay Cutler, that second extension for that grossly long amount of time, that's what another extension to Allen Robinson would remind me of, is that extension to Jay Cutler when you knew it wasn't working out and you just didn't want to rip the Band-Aid off. I would much rather have DJ Chark. So if we're going to go all in on a receiver, if Amari Cooper becomes available, yes, that is someone that I can see being a bona fide stud number one receiver in 2023. Like, no doubt about it. Otherwise, I'm looking at some of these lower tier names and signings. One guy I do want to mention in the draft, a later guy, reminds me a lot of Hunter Renfrow. He's starting to climb up the draft board a little bit. He might be at the end of the third if you can get a trade down, or like mid fourth, end of fourth round pick. Kyle Phillips from UCLA didn't test well. He's not fast. He's not strong. He can't jump high. He's one of those guys that's just like, for some reason, he always makes plays, even though he's not. He's like a non-athletic athlete, if that makes sense. Like, to me, he reminds me so much of Hunter Renfrow. That's what I'm saying. Get people that are going to contribute in 2023. A very good, solid slot receiver that's able to come down the middle of the field and work those seams with your tight end is going to be valuable next year. Treylon Burks, if he doesn't work out, he's going to become a non-factor by 2023. You know what I mean? If you're really trying to make a push. So,
well, and I really think I'm glad you brought up Treylon Burks, because I was just about to.
I love him too. I do.
He's one of those guys that I feel like Poles is going to have a list. Is if this guy falls to 39, we're grabbing him. Like, we're taking him. There's no question about it. And I feel like Treylon Burks is one of those guys. And I feel like Treylon Burks can be one of those guys. I feel like if Jamison Williams from Alabama ends up falling, he could be one of those guys. Jahan Dotson as well. If you honestly want a good slot guy, Dotson would be a decent one. He didn't test very well at combine, but he played a lot faster than he looked at Penn State. There's definitely options there. And I mean, dude, he had 12 touchdowns as well. 5'10", 175. Not necessarily a guy you want to pair next to Darnell Mooney, but a guy that you could put in the slot and keep Mooney on the outside to be able to run across the field. Because I still feel like Darnell Mooney is best suited still playing the outside, even with his size, just because of his ability to move down the field. And, to that point, even, just to touch back on the DJ Chark thing, is if we got him at the right price, just by his size and his matchup, you know what I mean? Like, teams are going to have to obviously put a little bit more coverage on a guy like DJ Chark. That will open up Darnell Mooney more. And I don't think it's crazy to think that Darnell Mooney could fire off another 1,000 yard season. I think Darnell has shown that he can carry the load on offense as long as he has someone who can also pick up a little bit of the slack. Otherwise, teams will also have to pay attention to Darnell Mooney. DJ Chark will get single coverage over the top, and that'll just be obvious of how that's going to work out for the defense. You know what I mean? Like, I think Darnell Mooney is that type of wide receiver. The only reason I'm bringing him up is just because he's gotten a lot of slander lately. It's driving me fucking crazy.
Everyone's like, oh, he's not a number one. It's like,
dude.
Why? Because he's small?
Yeah,
exactly.
I
don't think he's a bona fide number one wide receiver, but I'm not counting him out. Like, he's progressed at a very rapid pace, and he's a small guy, but there's a lot of small guys that are considered number one receivers. Like,
and I think that's a big, I guess what we still have to see, but I think that'll be a big reason why the Bears don't go for like a knockout punch at wide receiver, because they probably feel pretty confident in Darnell Mooney. And Darnell Mooney, this can't be understated. If you have a lot of confidence in Justin Fields, you should have a lot of confidence in Darnell Mooney, because Justin Fields fucking loves throwing the ball to Darnell Mooney. So, I mean, that's a chemistry, man. That's something you can't build overnight. That's something that Fields didn't necessarily build with a lot of other receivers on the roster. You know what I mean? He was feeding Darnell Mooney. He didn't really feed Allen Robinson. It never felt like there was a chemistry there. And I feel like that's another reason why Allen needs to be gone. But dude, you can't overstate chemistry. And, we saw a little bit of that with Cole Kmet as well. So
you want to keep slandering Cole Kmet. He's top 5 in receptions for fucking tight ends last year. And people do not want to acknowledge that. They the idea. That's what makes me sick about some Bears fans. You hate the idea of being wrong so much that you'd rather the Bears fucking miss on a second round pick that looks like he can be very promising. Like, you're hoping to God he sucks balls just so you could be right. Do you know how miserable of a life that is? Like, I prefer to be an optimist and give someone a chance until, okay, there's no more chance to be had. It's insane to me.
And the thing is, Lucas, with a guy like Cole Kmet, I forgot what game it was last year, but I think it was like against the Lions or something, where very obvious he was having a monumentally bad day, like probably the worst game of his career. Just, couldn't catch anything, couldn't hold on to anything. Like, it looked like he was just kind of lost out there. We can still acknowledge that. We're big Cole Kmet guys. We can still acknowledge, like, holy shit, Cole is having a horrible fucking game. But we also see enough potential in the other games that we're like, okay, this is still a guy I'm going to vouch for. This is still a guy I'm going to probably battle for, because we see what he's actually capable of. No, I think you hit the nail on the head, dude. Cole Kmet could have 12 catches on 13 targets, but that one target that he missed, Bears Twitter is going to fucking let him know about it. And it gets really old.
It's so fucking annoying. And I do want to defend myself. I looked up MVS is 230, or I'm sorry. Lazard is 230. He's only 6'1", but he's 230. So he is a thick boy. That's pretty big for a fucking wide receiver. I felt like for some reason he took a lot of shots and like didn't seem to phase him. So,
and I don't want to undersell Allen Lazard either, because he's a free agent that's, I feel like Aaron Rodgers would throw a fit 3 times over if they let him walk. But
yeah, I think they prioritize him more.
He's definitely a guy that's probably going to get a nice little chunk of money. I mean, out of whatever money the Packers think they can find.
Yeah, but I mean, so check this out, right? We're talking about DJ Chark. Like, imagine, okay, so would you rather spend $20 million on, say, Mike Williams, who I'm a big fan of? I'm actually a huge fan. That was one of the guys I was targeting before. When I saw his market value was $15.5 million, and then I saw he got 20, I was like, that's a bit of a discrepancy there. I really liked him at that 15.5 number. But if you look and think like, hey, would you rather have Mike Williams at $20 million, or would you rather have DJ Chark, Hunter Renfrow, a guy like Kyle Phillips, who for sure you can snag, and Darnell Mooney. You get those three guys for under $20 million on your books, or you could just have Mike Williams. Like, I think that's actually a pretty nice core there. If you were to have a guy that plays just like Hunter Renfrow, DJ Chark, who can go up and get the ball. He can definitely destroy any type of single high coverage. If you man him up, you are fucked. And then you have Darnell Mooney, who can stretch the field, who can do a couple things. I think a guy like Jakeem Grant is coming back, not only as a punt returner, but that's another guy that can definitely add an element of speed to the offense that can take the top off it. So you don't need to bust your nut in this free agency to become competitive this year. I think they can be a fringe playoff team if Poles makes the right moves. Like, everyone wants to talk about how bad of a situation the Bears are in. They're really not in that bad of a situation. Like, you have a couple contracts that suck. Every team has a couple contracts that suck, But in 2 years from now, all those contracts could be gone. You can be completely, 100% of the roster is who I decided to pay, right? Ryan Poles by 2024. So in 2023, he's got probably about 80% of that roster he can cut if he wants to and make it his own, So
Yeah.
he's not really a bad situation. Like, this year kind of sucks, but moving forward, the Bears are in a very healthy spot.
Yeah, and I think Poles understands that. I think Poles is looking ahead, and I think this is going to be it's going to be a good opportunity to see what you have on this roster. You know what I mean? Like, I think we are going to address the wide receiver room, obviously, but I really like kind of that idea that we're gonna try we're gonna try and see what's out there. We're gonna see what we have on this roster. I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Daz Newsome ended up getting some snaps in this offense, to at least see what he is. You know what I mean? A guy like Thomas Graham, obviously going into camp, I have a lot of high expectations for, but that still makes me think that they're gonna end up signing a veteran cornerback. You know what I mean? To kind of battle with them, but they're gonna see what we have. There are pieces on this roster. When we were jumping into last year, the really optimistic Bears fans were like, there's so much young talent on this roster. Like, we really got something here. And then now that's kind of turned into, well, Ryan Poles is going to blow up this entire roster. It's like, I think Poles doesn't feel the pressure that he has to do anything crazy right now. He doesn't feel the pressure that he has to reset this entire roster in one season. I think it's going to be a gradual build to what he did, kind of similar to what Ryan Pace did when he got here. It wasn't like a complete overhaul. It was like, all right, I'm going to gradually build to what I want. And by the time, I like that you said 2024, we could turn it around quicker than that, depending on what the players we have do this upcoming year. But,
if you hit on a majority of your moves, you can be a Super Bowl contender next year. There's no fucking doubt about it.
Especially if Justin Fields is the quarterback that we're all selling him as, then I really think we can do that. Like, let's say Justin goes out this year, regardless of who's out there on the field with him, he throws 30 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and runs for 500 yards. Like, we're immediately right there in the conversation heading into 2023, regardless of how 2022 ends.
Too, the NFC is really light right now. There's not a lot of top end teams. Tampa Bay is going to go into a rebuild pretty soon. LA and the Packers are making their last push, but they're getting a bit older, So it's like there's not a ton of competition in the NFC. Justin Fields, if he does become what scouts and what people believe he can become, I mean, you're talking about, like, you can have a straight dominance type, or he could be one of the two guys that are constantly battling for NFC championships. Like, that could be a reality. And I don't want to oversell it, because there's some things that need to be fixed. And we also need to figure out, like, how does Poles operate? We know a lot about Ryan Pace. We know he likes to trade up with his top picks and trade down with his mid picks to kind of recoup some of that draft capital. Like, we know the stuff that Ryan Pace likes to do. He likes to manipulate the board in the mid rounds. He'll come up as well in like the 5th round, 4th round, shit like that. Go get a guy that took a year off, like a Thomas Graham or someone along those lines that should have been a higher draft pick. He sees they're slipping. Like, we know what Ryan Pace's strategy is. We know how incompetent that bald, stupid fucking fraud was that we don't have to talk about anymore. Like, we don't know what Eberflus is about. We don't know what Poles is about. And I'm excited to find out. But if we're taking him at face value, he's saying, hey, we're gonna work that second and third wave of free agency. So I'm not expecting any big splashes, if something arises, and maybe, like I said, but you got to have a 2-year plan in mind. You have to have a 2-year plan in mind. There's no reason to operate thinking people are forgetting Ryan Poles has a fresh slate. Like they might have RP, and that's actually my brother's initials too. Shout out, but they might have the same initials RP. They're not the same person. So thinking that Ryan Poles is in the same situation Ryan Pace was in, where you have to keep pushing forward, hoping to get the results that you've been trying to get for 7 years. No, like Poles can reset. And that's something that I think you need to all be prepared for, especially on these lower level guys, these veteran signings, vet minimum signings. You're going to see a 50. I guarantee you by 2023, you will see 50% of the roster, the 53-man roster that was put out last year, will be completely brand new. Like, and we're going to see some of those low tier guys coming from the Colts defense, from, the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, we're going to see some of those low tier guys kind of come in and fill those spots instead of some of the guys that Pace got accustomed to.
Yeah. And, I think this year is really going to be a test run for Ryan Poles, kind of like how I was saying. He wants to see he's going to want to see what the roster is. He's going to want to see who's worth keeping and who's not. I could see him testing with a bunch of different stuff. And I'm really glad you brought up like the second or third wave of free agency. That's something I'm really interested to see. We've kind of got a little bit in, like I said, what we've talked about isn't like a sure system with Ryan Poles yet, because we don't know a lot. We kind of have a little bit of an idea how he feels about the draft. We don't know how he structures contracts. We don't know how aggressive he's going to be for a free agent that he wants, how he's going to be able to let a guy walk if he doesn't, if he can't get him for the right price. So we're going to see how that all works out. Like we said at the top of the show, we can offer anyone can offer the world on a silver platter, but it's actually getting it on that platter that we need to actually see. You know what I mean? So that's going to be the number one thing for Ryan Poles, is showing it. Is it all talk? Is he someone that tries to claim he's patient, but he's willing to go, give somebody Mike Williams deal who is not worthy of it? That's something we have to pay attention
Or
to.
Allen Robinson, who's not worthy of a large deal, especially after what he displayed last year.
And dude, is he like a 1 year guy? Does he like signing vets for 1 year to prove that they're worth something, to kind of hold a spot until a younger guy can go there? Are we going to get an Akeem Hicks type signing down the road? You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying.
That 1 year guy that didn't work out somewhere else. Is he going to be kind of a connoisseur of picking up draft busts, and seeing if they can build something back up in Chicago? You know what I mean? Because we've actually had a lot of success with that. A lot of teams have. Hell, look at what our boy Mitch is about to do in this free agency cycle. Former first round pick.
People fucking hate him so much.
Dude, there's at least someone who popped off the live chat just because we just brought up Mitch.
I like him, but I don't like him that much. I'm just not willing to shit all over him all the time, and like people hate me because of that. That's totally fine. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, fuck him.
No, yeah, but I think you're 100% correct, and I think, like you said, every GM comes in. He doesn't have a full scouting staff. He's working with guys that were brought in by Pace and guys that were even brought in before Pace. Like, he needs to figure out what his scouting staff is before he decides to completely destroy and tear down the roster. This is clearly an evaluation year. You need to see what you have, especially on rookie contracts, to see who you could possibly build on, move forward with, who you're going to have to move on from. I mean, you're talking about these guys are planning drafts years ahead. You think that the NFL, scouts didn't know that this was going to be a weak quarterback class? Like, you don't think that Ryan Pace calculated that and being like, yeah, if I give up a first round pick next year, it doesn't mean shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because right now what we're looking at in the top 15, this is one of the rare years that you would rather pick in the bottom half of the first round than the top half of the first round, because there's so much more room for error. Like, with a higher pick comes higher expectations. So you getting an average player at 9 or a bust at 9, I'm going to say average player because slightly above average player, like what's his name, Leonard Floyd, got absolutely dragged, and like he was never bad for us. So you're talking like the stakes are really high. I don't think there's many people that can meet that expectation in this draft, like meet the expectation of their draft status. So I think it's definitely a great draft to not have a first round pick. If you had to pick one of the last 5 years, this would be it. But I think that's going to make it way tougher to trade down. Maybe you could trade away a pick and just kind of eat not having a pick this year and move up around. So trade your, what do we got? We got a 5th rounder. Trade your 5th rounder for someone's 4th rounder next year or something, if someone really wants to move up bad. But other than that, like I don't know how much opportunity there's going to be for trade ups.
Yeah, well, I mean,
For
and
trade down.
that's yeah, I was gonna say people aren't gonna want to trade back. That's kind of what we were talking about near the top of the show was if people can't trade back, they're gonna just end up taking who the hell they want. You know, it's just it's good. It might hit a point by pick 15 that people are getting grabbed from this, mid second round grade. You know what I mean? Just in absolute pandemonium, like fucking Pete Carroll
Yeah.
drafted Rashad Penny type shit.
But does that change things too? Like at 39, you'd think that's pretty coveted, right? Like maybe a team that like Pittsburgh that doesn't have a quarterback is like, hey, you know what? Matt Corral for some reason fell to the end of the first round. We're targeting him at 39. If we can get, if we can get up, we'll give you some value because he might be our quarterback of the future. Like I think that comes into play too, right? Because you don't have any of those top end quarterbacks, but you have about 3 or 4 guys that you're like, hey man, if we develop them the right way, they could become something. Malik Willis, I think, is going to be a for sure first rounder, and probably Ritter, our boy Ritter, the shitter with that fritter. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's going in the first round. He tested unbelievably, but overall, you're going to have some of these teams drafting in the top of the second round that, like the Lions, they have another one before us, but depending on where they move, maybe they want to move back to 39 to get a quarterback to replace Jared Goff, or just one of these teams, the Saints. Like, so we'll see. We'll see exactly how it proceeds. But I just there's a lot to unpack, and I'm very happy that we're only a few days away, so we can really start covering real moves. Because I know we can go back and forth. Like, realistically, we should just pretend to go into a time warp and argue Dan Quinn. Because I feel like that would be A+ podcasting. Because I would lose my shit for 35 minutes straight.
Yeah, no, or we can bring up the anomaly that is Kellen Moore.
That's another one, man. Yeah,
Oh my
thank
god.
God we would have both been arrested.
Yeah, dude, there would have been hate crimes on both of us against each other. It would have been pretty fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, one guy he didn't bring up, and it's someone who I think can fall just because of his tiny ass hands that are, the biggest deal in the world. I could see Pittsburgh kind of really going in at Kenny Pickett, Pittsburgh guy anyway, you know what I mean? So it would actually make a lot of sense. And honestly, dude, he threw pretty damn well at combine. Like, yeah, he was wearing gloves. Man, we've seen quarterbacks throw with gloves before. Shit, Ben threw with a glove for like the entire second half of his career.
Maybe learning from the mistake of not drafting Dan Marino out of Pitt.
Yeah, no shit. That's kind of the one that I was thinking about too. Obviously, Dan had an arm of fucking pure bronze, but that's neither here nor there. But man, if I could have one scenario work out, dude, and I know you're probably sick of hearing about it, but I'm gonna keep talking about it. But dude, I want Traylon Burks to fall so bad just because of
I
his
like him
40
a lot.
time. Like I want the first round to be all the fucking wide receivers drafted with like the 4.3 and 4.4 40s. Like I want that to happen so badly because Traylon Burke ran a 4.55. And yeah, that sounds fucking terrible to combine. But like if you watch him play, he can play inside, outside. His route running is so crisp. Like he can make jump balls. Like, dude, he could be a 6'3" slot guy. He could do that if we asked him to do it. Like, and that's one thing I really want us to really go at in this draft is just go get some fucking good football players. Go get guys who maybe they didn't play on the best team in the world. Traylon Burks played at Arkansas. I don't really have a lot of respect for a college like Arkansas personally, but like don't draft a helmet, draft a player. Go get a guy who just looks like the best guy on the fucking field at all times. You know what I mean? Because all the combine darlings, that's going to be the first 2 rounds. I feel like are going to be the entire first round is going to be combine darlings because nobody really likes talent in the first place, and then second round is going to be kind of a mixture of it. And we could see a guy like Traylon Burks definitely fall into that spot
for sure. I mean, I don't listen. I try to tell everyone this every single year, and I update my list every single year, and I'll just go through. And usually the Bears don't have a fucking first round pick, so I break it down by 1 through 10, 1 through 20, 1 through 32, and then 1 through 50, because usually the Bears are picking right around that 50 range, at least the last few years. And I'll go and see what's the average amount of people drafted at that position per thing. And if you look at 1 through 50, the amount of wide receivers that typically get drafted over the last decade or 12 years has been 5.5. Now it varies. A year like 2019, there was 7 or 8 selected in the top 50. There was a lot more talent on the top end. When we look at what the wide receiver class is this year, that's the thing, though. Does the quarterbacks being not as top heavy push some of those receivers down the board, and then we see a quick run on them? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many factors that play into it. But when you look at the top end level talent, it's nowhere near what it was in 2019 or even what it was last year. So if you have your top 6 receivers and, the last one seems to be that kid from Purdue that I'm not very high on, David Bell, like, okay, we'll let that fall off. But if maybe it's Traylon Burks, like, cool. Now there's a possibility it could be an outlier, and we're not going towards the mean. It's going to be one of those drafts where a ton go off the board in the top 50. But all I'm saying is it's not out of the likelihood for people to get drafted late. There's always a random team like Oakland that'll take a kicker in the second round. Like, there's always some weird shit that happens. There's quarterbacks always get first priority. So, I mean, and wide receiver is a very important position, probably the second or third most important position on offense. But at some point, there's only 32 picks in one round. And there's only so many teams that actually need a wide receiver. And it's like, would you really draft a wide receiver if you don't need it? It depends on where you're at. If it's a CD Lamb type prospect and you're picking at 17 near the Cowboys, you're like, shit, I have to take him, But there's no CD Lamb in this draft. There's no one that's that level of prospect.
No, there's not. And you could also kind of hit that mixture of getting the best player available. But what if like the second to third best player is someone you really need? You know what I mean? So like say we get depleted at wide receiver at 39 and we do end up sticking, and you brought it up earlier in the show, there's really good interior defensive linemen in this draft. And I don't know how much research you've done, but probably the number one guy I would really like if he's available at that spot and there's not a run on defensive tackles would be a guy, Zachary Carter from Florida. Dude, he's played in both.
Very good player.
Yeah, dude, he's very athletic for his size too. 6'3", 287. And he was on a defense that wasn't necessarily good, but it was just so obvious how much he played out. And we've talked about wide receivers more than anything on this podcast so far, and I'm sure that'll continue moving forward. But all depending on what happens with Eddie Goldman, we could very well need a defensive tackle, and we wouldn't be really reaching, I feel like, at 39 if we were to stick there and draft one. I feel like Bears Twitter will lose their fucking minds if we draft a defensive tackle at 39.
I would be so happy.
Dude, if it's Zachary Carter or it's fucking Devontae Wyatt, like I am all for it.
Devontae Wyatt has that's what I'm saying. Like it's going to be one of someone's going to be there at that position and they have no business being there because some idiot took Kenny Pickett because they were like, hey, maybe he'll figure it out for us. That's what, and you're going to give up and it happens every single year, specifically in the first round. You are passing over guys that have clearly shown on the field, like, just don't overthink it. They're going to be a 10-year player in the NFL at a minimum. You could go ahead and select this and make this safe decision, or you can get a guy that you're like, hey man, this guy has a possibility to be a game buster. Because realistically, to be a true Super Bowl contender, you can't have a bunch of solid 10-year veterans. You need some of those guys that are just gangbusters, that are just far above and beyond the competition. You need a guy like Aaron Donald. You need a guy like, I'm not going to say Jalen Ramsey because he got his shit rocked. But you need a guy like Von Miller. Like, you need a guy like Cooper Kupp. But you're not going to get all those guys in one draft. So, and the Bears have enough of a need at those B- to C+ players where it's like, just fill those needs, bro. And then you can spend all the money you want on your A players.
Yeah, 100%. And to anybody who would be against drafting a down lineman in this draft, I got 3 names for you. Tommy Harris, Henry Melton, Anthony Adams. Defensive tackles in the 4-3 who made an impact on every single defensive play of the game.
Well, and you got to think about it too. Like, we're moving Quinn and Mack. Now, Mack might play some, possibly Sam Backer, he's not going to play any Mike, but, I mean, he did play in a 4-3 and he played outside backer, but it was a hybrid role and he was blitzing in nickel and stuff like that. But you got to think, like, your D line is now went from, hey, we're just paying Eddie Goldman on the D line to, hey, we're paying Eddie Goldman, Robert Quinn, and Khalil Mack. Like, your defensive line is damn near a $70 million cap hit. Is that how you want to roll into the season? Like,
Yeah, and I think that's why if anyone's really up for debate right now, and you do, come on, you especially are professed Eddie Goldman guy, but his
I love him,
contract's
but
just
he's the
looking rough right
clearest
now. You know
one.
what I
Like,
mean?
he's the clearest and most obvious. He's a situational guy. He's much better served to play a two gap role. He's a true 3-4 nose tackle. Like, he seems to be the candidate, but it's like, are you going to replace him for $5 million? You know, because that's all you're saving on getting him. But it's a reality that's what I'm saying. But you don't have to deal with that after this year. Like, you can get rid of Goldman for pretty much nothing. You can get out of Mac's contract a lot later. You can get out of Quinn's contract a lot later. So you do have room in a year. That's why I'm saying it's not that bad. But overall, like, just gotta fill holes, man. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. You got a lot of holes to fill, and you have a lot of improvements that you can make. And it's, I mean, I'm just excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, same here, man. I'm actually really excited to see what Kyrus Tonga looks like shooting gaps, especially if he could be that Anthony Adams type defensive tackle opposite of like a legit pass rusher. That's
People
beautiful.
forget that was like, people were saying that he's not fit for a two gap when he was coming out. They were like, his biggest problem is he shoots gaps, and that's literally what the fuck he has to do. And of
Yeah.
course, so it's like, and you're talking about someone that got picked in the 7th round. What's his contract? 645. You know,
Yeah,
like,
that's what I mean. And he could be a potential guy. Obviously, dude, look at a guy like Danny Shelton. He was a guy that you would not consider like a pass rushing type defensive tackle, dude. Even Snacks Harrison, they both played in 4-3 defenses, and they were studs because they had a pass rushing defensive tackle next to them, and they were allowed to do whatever the fuck they want, really. Just shoot fucking gaps and just maul people. So
yeah.
but yeah, anyway, we are definitely running a little bit long, but I mean, dude,
What
first
was our
episode,
episode supposed to be timed? I mean, I don't really care.
dude. All right, so one thing I have to bring this up. Me and Lucas are our own bosses right now, so we
Yeah,
could fucking go 3 hours if we really wanted
for
to. Like,
sure,
it
for
does
sure.
not matter. But it's getting about an hour. People are probably losing interest. They're probably sick of staring at us. But
Just ready to slam their shit in their desk drawer.
well, dude, it's we're gonna sit here and we're gonna talk about what we think Ryan Poles is gonna do for fucking ever. You know what I mean? But it's like
Yeah,
until we see a little bit of his free agent strategy, it's kind of hard to say what he's gonna do. Like I've said a million fucking times already on this podcast, like we don't know what he's gonna do until we actually see it. And I'm really interested to see how much influence Eberflus has in the roster as well as a guy like Luke Getsy, because if we end up getting a wide receiver from the Packers, it's going to have Luke Getsy written all over it. So there's going
and
to be.
Getsy was the most impressive hire out of all the hires. I like Allen too, but supposedly Getsy, at least on paper, was the most impressive out of all of them.
Dude, if it pains me to ever go to the Packers YouTube channel, but listening to Luke Getsy talk about football is genuinely something I can really get up with, because he seems like a guy that gets it. Obviously, he's always going to be pegged as a guy that, worked with Aaron Rodgers, worked with Devontae Adams, so be that as you will. I really think he was a knock it out of the park hire, and it's going to bring a certain stability and a legitimateness to our offense that we just have not seen, because Matt Nagy's just so fucking bad at everything he does. So.
Yeah, no, that's the greatest part, is like, Eberflus is wearing a full fucking hat. There's a top on the top of it, and he has hair as well. So, and I don't have anything against bald people. There's bald people in my family. I actually, like the follically challenge, like if that's something you're self-conscious about, I'm sorry. But at the end of the day, when you are bald and fraudulent at the same time, just doesn't work out. You become a bald fraud. So that's not something we're ever going to support. One other thing I want to close on. Another prospect that I really, really like at 39, and I think he's going to easily get there, and I think he would play an enormous role on this defense moving forward. And it's not going to be a popular pick, and people won't like it, but the kid, I believe his name is Lewis Kine from Georgia. He is like legitimately what you want to pair with Eddie Jackson and base, and he's exactly what you want in terms of a big nickel. Like you saw what kind of role. I'm blanking on the kid's name. The slot, Moore from the Colts. He played a huge role as their slot
Oh yeah, I
corner.
know who you're talking about.
Yeah. I can't think of his first name right now, but that's what he reminds me of. And he's a bigger prospect and more elite prospect. So I think he can play an enormous role. And if he's there, I think it's definitely tempting for their staff. I think he's a perfect fit. So
Yeah,
be on the lookout for him. Check out his highlights and stuff like that.
no, that is another guy that I like. And strong safety or really anything to pair with Eddie Jackson is going to be something of the utmost importance. You know, to Sean Gibson, you know, we appreciate your service, but we need something more from that position next to Eddie Jackson. We can't, at even people who don't like Eddie Jackson, you have to be able to admit he was like he had to do so much extra. Like it was so obvious that had to be near the ball at all times in the back end because he just was not being given enough support at that other safety position. So honestly, I do like Lewis Sign. I think that would be a solid pick. I really like Joaquin Brisker from Penn State. Penn State actually has some pretty good talent come out of this draft. I guess I have an affinity for Penn State safeties because I also really liked Adrian Amos when we had him as well. But he's a solid dude. He's solid, man. He's got speed. He's got instincts. He can hit. Like he can do a little bit of everything. He's kind of that safety valve. He can play in the box. He can play back. He can go run in the slot too if you need him to. He's kind of a little mixture of a little bit of everything. And I really like what he brings to the table as a safety. But I think I wouldn't hate safety at 39 as long as it's the right guy, you know, because there's safety depth in the past few drafts that have been phenomenal that people just really haven't honed in on because they're so attached to position players or they're so attached to the 6'3", 225 box safety like Jamal Adams. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, and I think that's like I'm glad we're actually talking about safeties now because we've kind of highlighted this is final thought, guys. I'm sorry, but we highlighted you know, just 40 times and stuff like that. To me, that's the difference between an Adrian Amos and an Antoine Winfield, right? That's the difference between a second round safety who should have been a first round safety versus a guy that got taken in the fourth, because one is just different. They're both very, very good football players. Amos is a very good football player, but Winfield is just different. And that's what I'm hoping that we would, if we do take someone at 39, that's the type of impact I'm talking about. That's a 4-year impact you will welcome to your team.
yeah, and you nailed it right there. 4 years. That's why, you know, I was talking about this in a group chat earlier. That's why draft capital is so important, even over money, because that's a 4-year deal that they have to sign that you're good paying. Because if they're an impact player, it's going to be a fucking steal by year 2. I mean, look at what we're getting with Darnell Mooney right now.
That's disgusting. Yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta pay $12,000, $15,000 for 1,000 yards.
Yeah, that's nuts. But yeah, I think that's a good place to stop though. We're definitely gonna have a lot of draft talk moving forward. This is my favorite time of the year is during the draft. Like I'm all about it. Are you like trying to signal something to me with your
No,
fucking thumb?
I'm just being stupid. I'm sorry.
Okay, I thought you were like trying to tell me something.
No,
with your
I
thumb.
just kind of zoned out on me in my own camera. Just being a scumbag. I'm sorry.
All right, but yeah. Anyway, guys, that was the first episode of Barely There. I'm Duke Coughlin. You can follow me on Twitter at that pod guy Duke. You can follow Lucas Perfetti at Lucas Perfetti 46. You can follow the podcast. Hopefully, you're watching it there right now. Barely There Pod on Twitter. God, it just feels good to be back. Honestly,
Yeah, I was a little relentless today. I'm not gonna lie, because I feel like I've had like pent up like 3 months of reading stupid tweets that I'm just like I need to explode right now. And there's so much more I have to say, but
oh, dude, I didn't even like touch the tip of the fucking iceberg. Like, I could have went on an all day rant about Darnell Mooney today, and I'll definitely have some on here. So,
for sure.
But anyway, wherever you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple, Anchor, we're trying to get it going on Google right now. Google's being a real pain in the ass to me, but we'll get it figured out. Definitely,
Google Play is the son of a bitch.
Yeah, it really is. Try to rate us, subscribe, follow us, whatever you got to do. All support's appreciated. Listen, man, we're 2 Jagoffs just trying to get it figured out. This has been Barely There, and bear down.
Bear down. Yeah, my fault. I was gonna say something worse, but bear down.
Go ahead.
No, that's it. That's all I got. It was off the air type of thing. It's just bear down. It's just bear down.